Hello and welcome to this preview of the Banker's April edition. It's the first we've done under the coronavirus lockdown. My name is Brian Caplen, editor of The Banker, and I'm joined on the line by James King, who's Europe editor, and he wrote the cover story for the April issue on central bank digital currencies. James, thanks for joining us. And let's start by asking you a bit about, why are central banks starting to get interested in digital currencies? It was always considered something a little bit sort of fringy and not really mainstream, but now you've got the central banks seem to be making it a bit respectable. Why are they getting interested at this point?
Well, we've seen obviously a few outlying central banks looking into this for a number of years now, and I'm thinking here of the Bank of England, for example, and the People's Bank of China, who spent quite a bit of time looking and researching into, I guess, the benefits and challenges as well that the central bank digital currencies represent. But more recently, we've seen a bigger flurry of central banks looking into this as a result of Facebook's Libra announcements midway through 2019.
Yeah, why was that so significant?
That really catalyzed, I guess, interest and efforts on the part of central banks because it was more or less a threat. It was something which, if launched, could undermine.
They were worried that if they didn't kind of take it on board, that players like Facebook might just take it over and they would lose control of it.
Exactly right. Exactly that. So that really jolted many of them into looking into this more seriously and taking more action on this front.
Okay, now who's out in front on this? I mean, which central banks are really taking the lead on it?
So in terms of where we stand today, really it's a case of many of the emerging economies who are more out in front of many of their advanced economy peers. So the PBOC has been working hard on this for a few years, but more interestingly, we're seeing a lot of progress from many island nations. So thinking here of the Marshall Islands, of the Bahamas, of Barbados, and also markets with a strong remittance use case, so Cambodia and Southeast Asia more generally.
Okay, now the remittance case I get, but with places like the Marshall Islands, isn't there also an element of the whole kind of anti-money laundering regulations has led to correspondent banks clamping down on correspondent lines to those kinds of places?
That's correct, exactly. And so they are facing real pressure now to essentially keep themselves within the financial system. And one way of looking or addressing this, doing this or achieving this is by launching a digital currency which has more effective AML and CFT controls in place, sort of baked into the currency. And that's very attractive for obviously for island countries, island nations like the Marshall Islands.
Okay, but in your article, you also say that Sweden has shown a lot of interest in this. I mean, what are they doing in Sweden?
That's right. So Sweden actually is one of the, I guess, the outliers in terms of the advanced economies. It really has made a lot of progress, and the Riksbank is trialing an e-krona at the moment, and that's because the use of cash has just dropped away so significantly in the country, and the Riksbank is sort of concerned about what that means for the economy moving forward, and they're looking at launching an e-krona to essentially fill that hole and address that market need to, as the use of cash basically declines in the country.
Okay, that's very interesting. But I mean, clearly that's a trend we're going to see in all the advanced economies eventually, aren't we? We are going to see the decline of cash. I mean, does it make sense to you that, where Sweden is leading, a lot of the other countries, the UK, perhaps some of the European Union countries will follow suit?
I think ultimately that's the direction of travel, and that will just be a question of timing and who moves there in sort of most quickly and with what kind of speed. So we're seeing the Bank of England, the Bank of Japan, the ECB, and a few others working together now with the BIS to research what CBDCs mean for macroeconomic stability and obviously questions around AML and CFT compliance and so on. So there is definitely a push towards this, but it's just a question of time now.
Okay. Now, the other distinction you make in the story is between doing it for retail customers and doing it for wholesale customers. So, I mean, what's the kind of thinking behind that? Why do they have different needs, and why would you prioritize one group over another?
Well, I guess again, this is very much a use case scenario. So, in general, obviously Sweden being the outlier, but in general, in most advanced economies, retail users or consumers don't necessarily have a strong demand or a strong need for a digital currency at this moment because payment systems tend to work quite well. So, what does make more sense in some scenarios is a wholesale CBDC. That would obviously drive efficiencies in terms of banks and institutional entities which have accounts with the central bank already, and that makes more sense right now. But obviously, that use case will change as consumer behavior changes in the future.
Okay, now look, we're in very unusual times, aren't we? And some people have said, with the whole sort of coronavirus thing, when we do finally get through this, it's an opportunity to rethink how the world works, and maybe we can start to reorganize things so that they're done on a more ecological, climate friendly basis. I mean, can the whole digital currency thing play any kind of role in that?
I think it can in certain scenarios, and I think an interesting point here is the Marshall Islands, who are using the sale of their central currency to generate funds to support actions like their fight against climate change, to support the healthcare needs of their citizens, and so on. So there is definitely a case there to be made that in some circumstances it can be a useful tool, in the fight against climate change, for example.
Okay, thanks very much, James. I mean, it's a very exciting story, and readers should get hold of the April issue of The Banker. You can order your copy on thebanker.com, together with a whole range of stories and features, especially looking at the coronavirus impact on banking. Thank you very much.